Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back in with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Raw Reaction series show, in which we react to the latest Arsenal news, matches, transfers, anything really. And it's been a bit of a hectic week. It's been the international break, which means that we've been sort of bereft of football. But my life in general has been a bit of a craze. If you were listening to the most recent show, which we did, which you can still check out on the channel, which we sort of had a more kind of a blunt, honest view and sort of how player abuse happens from fans and how Emery's being treated and stuff like that. I said at the end of the show that things are changing in the life of me, really, because I'm going to get a new house for the first time, which basically has meant a huge financial outlay. But always that happens when you go to these big purchases, I find, and those younger viewers that are here, you'll definitely experience this when you grow up, is that when you start to spend money on big things like houses, other things just start to go wrong. So for instance, the reason why I'm still in my smart attire, I come straight from work to do this video for you guys, is that I go to the garage, right? I go to the garage and all of a sudden I find out that 3 of my tyres have gone. Not the one tyre that I went to get changed, but 3. So that's just great. And speaking of money, that's sort of where today's show is going to go, is the outlay that Arsenal are going to pay to keep Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang on their books. And that's certainly something of a bit of controversy that I want to talk about. And also some news which dropped today, which is sort of clarification around Unai Emery's contract that he's currently on. And we're going to discuss that a little bit later as well. But first off, thank you ever so much to everyone that's in our live chat. See plenty of our regulars and some new people as well. Got some regulars like Carl Halberg. Always a pleasure, mate. You are on it with these videos, I have to say, Carl. Wang is in here. Bernie Guy is in here. Joseph is in here. Official JK. Anonymous. Thank you ever so much, people, for tuning in. Plenty of you are coming in. If you want to get involved with our live chats, if you're watching on playback, just click that subscription button first and then the little bell button, which will notify you immediately that you can go live and join in with our discussion, our live chat. So let's talk about 350k. Now, the reason for the break in my voice into laughter is because I can see people writing in our chat that 350k is cursed. Arsenal for life and the limbic system, all cursed. Ola, thank you for tuning in, mate. Nico, thank you. William Saliba. Wow, William Saliba's tuned in. Amazing. 350k for Aubameyang. So the reason why you've looked at this thumbnail and you've seen a Mesut Ozil in the background of this thumbnail is quite simply because, well, he's the other player on our team, which is worth 350k, and that's why people at Arsenal for life in there have dropped in that they think it's cursed. And do I think it's cursed? I'm not sure if I think it's cursed. We've never paid anyone that much before since Mesut Ozil re-signed to get his more improved deal. Now, when we look at how much Aubameyang has sort of contributed in comparison to Mesut Ozil, I think that we can agree the contribution in his stint in most recent years has certainly been way far and beyond what the German has. Has, for instance, the effort of Mesut Ozil gone down since he signed that new deal? I'm not sure. I think that before he signed the new deal, there was still a lot of questions about his commitment and how much he was putting in. Actually, re-signing the deal may have been a problem. I would probably argue the fact that it's been a deterioration since that deal. Now, does that mean it's going to be the same for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang? No, it doesn't. Of course, it doesn't mean that. Now, in terms of how much he's on right now, I believe it's in the higher 100,000s, maybe edging onto 200,000. Which was less, ironically, than Mkhitaryan, though I believe was on about 220k, because obviously came from Manchester United, who were paying him loads. And we're looking at a fee which could rise to 350k. I think that the more realistic figure is between the 250 to 300 range. I think that's more what we will see. But the news articles that I've been reading have been sort of highlighting the fact that Aubameyang feels that his effort and his commitment into the team is way higher or equal to Mesut Ozil's, and so therefore he should earn the same amount as Mesut Ozil. Now, if that means that Aubameyang is worth 350k a week, I'm not so sure, because I think the reason, or not the reason, but the actual impact of Mesut Ozil signing that bumper deal had a huge impact on the wage structure of our club. Before that, we had quite a legitimate, quite a restricted wage budget. We sort of kept players under the £200,000 mark. Yes, I think we overpaid for players like Cole Jenkinson, like Auba, these type of players like El Nini. I think we definitely overpaid those players in terms of their wages. But I just think that once you cross that line and once you pay that player that bumper contract, other players who see themselves as something that when they look at Ozil, when they look at him and go, well, I'm putting in more than he is, I'm doing more for the team, then for me, that says that you've got a broken structure and you need to do something about it. Now, I think we can all agree that Mesut Ozil's time at Arsenal is now limited. With Unai Emery still at the club and what we're talking about in a minute, what seems to be definitely into next season, that I think we can agree that if we remove Mesut Ozil from the equation, we can start to recover our wage structure and start to get a little bit more of a foothold on what we pay players. If we keep someone like Mesut Ozil at the club and earning that amount of money, then I think that we can easily say that we're going to have an issue in terms of how much we pay players. Ryan Finity says Laka is more important. I saw a couple of people talking about Lacazette. Mr. Adlib says that if he is 300k, what is Lacazette worth? Obviously, Lacazette is also someone that we want to tie down to a new deal. Do I think he's worth more? I think that Aubameyang would get paid more, one, because he's older and he's sort of coming to that point where he's peaked, and Lacazette could still earn another contract at the club, if you know what I mean. This is sort of his final contract at a top club before he reaches the mid-30s, in my opinion, and moves on or chooses to retire, and in which case his next contract would be on lesser terms, you would think. The issue is that a lot of people on Twitter, and I've had this conversation with plenty of people, wouldn't pay him that much because he's over 30. Now, if a player is over 30, in my mind, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to become worse immediately. And I tweeted out a list of players that I thought definitely improved. You had the likes of Ibrahimovic, you had the likes of Di Natale, like Jamie Vardy, for instance, like as I mentioned, Di Natale. There's a lot of Italian examples. Quagliarella, for instance. These players improved. Teddy Sheringham, Ian Wright was the big one that I thought of. These players improved after their 30th birthday. At the end of the day, a number does not signify a player's quality. It's as simple as that. And there's plenty of examples. Ones I've highlighted. I mean, people were shouting Ronaldo at me on Twitter that I'd not mentioned him. I think he's a bit of an anomaly, though, Ronaldo. But when you look at what a player is worth and what their quality is, just because they suddenly hit this magic number of 30, because it's a round, nice OCD number, it means that we can then suddenly say something must change. We've hit a round number, so that means something must happen. It doesn't. I had someone send me an article saying that players peak between 27, 28, 29. I don't disagree with that. I think they peak maybe then. But it's not for all players. And players don't suddenly just diminish in value after their 30th birthday in terms of how much you pay them. Aubameyang, as we've seen, has continued to score goals throughout his time at Arsenal. His record is fantastic. His goal scoring is up there with the likes of Thierry Henry, and that is not an exaggeration. It genuinely is up there. If he was to play for this amount of time, get that amount of games at the same age, maybe we could have seen some reflection in the same sort of numbers. But he's going to be doing this into his 31. He's going to be doing it into 32. I can see it doing into 33. I saw a comment just a second ago from Archie who said that Auba will always score goals, even at 34. Now, one thing that I will admit will diminish is the pace. Now, we know that pace will drop, but when you've got a player like Aubameyang whose pace is so significant and so rapid and so powerful for that player, I don't see that pace diminishing at such a rate that it would just drop off a cliff. I wouldn't see that. I wouldn't think that would happen. And keeping Auba at the club, I think, as we've seen this season, is so necessary for the if and hopefully when we qualify for the Champions League. We've got a player at the club that is of that level, that can continue to take this team forward, can be a figurehead for the likes of Nketiah, for the likes of Martinelli, players that could play as that striker role, players that can play centrally, and be that sort of beacon of what you want to become and what you should aspire to be. And I think getting and keeping those characters in the team is hugely important, massively important. Let's get some of your thoughts in our chat. Gary Hardy says, I think 350k is a bit much, but still worth at least 250k. Glenn says, when you hit 30-year-olds, a new club wants to pay you for what you will do for them, not what you did in the past. That's the way things are going. And I agree with that. I think that the difference is with Auba is that he will continue to he will not develop, but he will continue to perform for us, and that's why he is worth that amount of money. Can't I ask you a question unrelated? Do you feel Ian Wright deserves a status like Bergkamp? I think that in terms of commitment to the club, he's certainly up there. In terms of ability, I don't think he's on that level. But I mean, that was an irrelevant question. You got an irrelevant answer. So there you go. Ben Parfitt says, I'm praying this doesn't come back to haunt us. Gary says, still be a poacher even if pace reduces, which is a fantastic point. Cole says, if it's his last long-term contract, the money is irrelevant. Definitely a good point there. Crypto says, Albert is over 30 and he'll eventually dip in form, and then we're stuck with a player on big wages. Max 2-year contract. Now, the thing is, his current deal actually runs out in 2021. So you've still got just under 2 years left of seeing the Gabonese striker in an Arsenal shirt, unless we sell him, of course. I think an extension would bring him to 2022, at which point he would be 32, 33 years old. I think that's a good amount. You can make sort of a judgment at the end of that, whether you then start to put 1-year extension clauses in, diminished fees, because you know that they're probably not going to pay as much. I think it's really important that you sort of manage this situation effectively. Yes, I think that he deserves a pay rise, because as another point that I raise is that what is the point of being at a football club and playing, or any sort of, what's the point of being in any employment if you know that the longer you spend there, you can't reach a higher ceiling? I think it's ridiculous to say that you're 30 years old, you're at a club, you're scoring, you're the top scorer in the team, you're performing week in, week out. Who's to say that you should continue on that top form if you've got nothing to aspire to work for? And if you haven't got that next level to jump to, psychologically that has an impact, and we know that. So I think it makes complete sense to have a player at 30 still looking to achieve higher wages at a team to push him forward. And when he reaches that, unlike Mesut Ozil, you'd hope that it would have the impact to keep pushing them forwards and keep them moving on and improving. Taib says, who would you replace Auba with if he was to leave? I mean, there's a strong argument to say that why can't Lacazette fill that role, and then you've got Nketiah and Martinelli in behind. I think at Arsenal, we need to really focus our funds on improving the defence and defensive midfield. So for me, I think we've got enough quality in youth and in Lacazette that we've already got someone there that can take that role on if the time does come that Auba does move on. TD Shifts says, I want Auba and Lacazette to have new contracts, but 350k, I'm not sure. Big fan from Australia. Thank you, TD, for tuning in. Wilson's in here. Crotus says, sell them all. I think that's a bit rash, mate. Krish KR7 says, I'm just in. Emery signed or they triggered a 1-year option. Let's move on to this second part of the news. Apologies if you start hearing the rain in the background, because it has just started to rain. But in terms of Unai Emery, no, he's not just signed a new contract. He hasn't suddenly turned around and signed a 3-year deal. But the news dropped today that when he signed his original deal, it wasn't a 2-year with an addition. It wasn't a 3-year with an option to sort of cut out. It was a 3-year deal, solid. According to David Ornstein, Unai Emery signed a 3-year deal when he came into the club, and that was that. It wasn't a 3-year deal, as I said, where he could escape from after 2. It wasn't a 2-year deal with a 1-year option. It was a solid 3-year contract, which means that most likely Unai Emery will be at the club next season. We've seen reports that Raul Sanllehi has come out and said that he has to, well, not he has, but the expectation is that he is to achieve Champions League football qualification this season. And that is completely fair. In the chat, I'm going to throw you a question, and I'll throw up some of your answers on the screen. If we do not achieve Champions League football this season, not what you think, but in terms of what you think the board will do you think if we achieve if we don't achieve Champions League qualification this season, he will be sacked? Cat out. Category yes or no. Do you think the club will sack him if he doesn't achieve Champions League qualification this season? Because as we know, it's no option. There's no cutout. He is here for those 3 years unless we make a decision. Do you think if he doesn't, will we make that decision in our own hands? Let's see what some of you are saying. Gary Hardy says, I think he's gone if he doesn't achieve Champions League football. TD Shift says yes. Cole says yes. Manosh says yes. Krish says yes, he'll be sacked. Plenty of you thinking that he will be gone. Nothing, it's all talk, says Gillo. Archie says Raul will send him packing. Isaac Brooks says no. Roy Copper says yes. Avon says entirely dependent. I just missed that answer. Entirely dependent on might be available to bring in someone else. I think that's a big one. It's actually depending on who we could bring in to replace him. It's a really, really tough one. Ola says, I think that's the minimum requirement that he achieves Champions League qualification. Guido says, no, it's all talk. Javier says, I think they get rid of him. Talking about Auba, says Nico. Oh, fair enough. In my opinion, do I think they'd get rid of him? Where my head is right now is that I don't see Arsenal still as a sacking club. Would I get rid of him if we don't achieve Champions League football? Yes. Yes, I would get rid of him. But do I see Arsenal terminating the contract of Unai Emery if he doesn't achieve Champions League football? No, I don't. Not at this stage. I don't think he does. This rain is a joke. I won't have to worry about this when I move out of this house. I really won't. Gillo says, who could we bring in, do you think? Allegri is obviously out of the loop right now. I think we can all be agreed that Manchester United are most likely going to be getting rid of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I think we also have a chance that Tottenham Hotspur could be getting rid of Mauricio Pochettino. Does that mean Pochettino goes to Manchester United? Who knows? There is a chance that Pep Guardiola, does he not achieve Champions League or the league this season, could move on from Manchester City. There is a chance. I genuinely believe if he doesn't achieve those two things, do they decide to move on? Do they look at Poch and think he got them to the Champions League final? Do they bring someone like him in? It's a really interesting state of affairs at plenty of teams. I'm really intrigued to see what would happen if City achieved nothing this season. Would they finally think that clearly, like at Bayern, he couldn't achieve Champions League, he can't do it at City? Do they need more of a specialist in that area? It's going to be really, really intriguing to see what plays out amongst many teams moving forwards. Aya says, I would replace him with Nagelsmann. The board needs to learn from its past mistakes of being passive. They must sack Emery if he doesn't deliver. Nagelsmann, of course, just taken over the role at RB Leipzig. Would he leave that role after just one season? I'm not so sure. Avon reckons there's going to be a merry-go-round. Evening, Omar. Thanks for tuning in, mate. Javier says, I would love to see Vieira back at the club, obviously at Nice right now. I'm not really too sure how it's going on at Nice. Maybe that's something we could talk to Jeremy Smith about, our French football expert. Carl says, I would get Deschamps for a year, so he has no choice but to play Lacquer. Very, very true. Ola says he would get oh no. I know exactly what's going on. Shumoy says, no Champions League, no Emery. Get Out Stan Cronker says, why are English managers in the decline in the Premier League? Really, really good question. In terms of English managers, there really isn't too many. I mean, Eddie Howe is the one that pops into my head. Brendan Rodgers, of course, believe is Northern Irish. I might have got that completely wrong, but I'm pretty sure he is Northern Irish. Doing a really, really good job at Leicester. But in terms of actual English managers, it really doesn't spring to mind too many. The most successful one in recent memory I can think of is, annoyingly, how Harry Redknapp sort of bridged the gap from Spurs being that lower class team to sort of challenging and becoming that Champions League side. He sort of was in that transition era. I can't really think of too many other English managers that have had really good success with a really, really top class team. It just doesn't really pop into my head. Emrad says that Brendan Rodgers would be a perfect fit, the Northern Irish manager. Avon, thank you for confirming that. I thought he was. Is sort of someone that is looked at Leicester as someone who's doing really, really good job. Celtic never really sort of wanted to achieve what they wanted, which was to progress in the Champions League. Didn't really do that. Of course, he did really well in the domestic cups in Scotland. And at Liverpool, really, really pushed Man City for the title, but ultimately blew it. And is he someone that I think is ready to take that step up? If Leicester achieve Europa League football this season, achieve breaking into that top six, there is a real strong candidacy. Oh, that's a really hard word to say. A real candidacy for Brendan Rodgers to take on the possible role at Arsenal. I would be really intrigued to see what would happen. Unai Emery says, Harry Redknapp says, Glenn Wilson says, do you think that Arsenal will finish third this season? I think there's a really good chance that we will. If you were to bet on a position, yes, I'd go with that. The Ajax manager, please remind me who the Ajax manager is. He's that bald guy with the stubbly beard. I can't remember what his name is, though. Avon says, let's just go full and get Claudio Ranieri. He's just signed a new deal at Sampdoria. Not new deal, but he's just taken over at Sampdoria, I believe. Ola says, do you think Arteta is ready for the Arsenal job? No, I don't think he is. I don't really want someone that's going to come in who's never really had managerial experience. And that's sort of what takes me away from Freddie Ljungberg. I would like to see Freddie Ljungberg continue his development, maybe take on a managerial role elsewhere before we bring him back in. It's just, I really, really want to see someone come in with prestige. when Unai Emery was linked to the club, it really didn't bring the sort of, thank God, we've got a complete change. We did have a change, but we haven't really got someone in with real accolades. Yes, he did really well at Sevilla in terms of the Europa League, but I want a Champions League winner. I want a Premier League winner. I want someone who is a proven winner of trophies, that knows his style, that you know clearly what impact he's going to have on the team. And I just don't think players like managers and coaches like Arteta and Ljungberg are that type. Ancelotti, says TD Shifts, who's obviously doing a decent job at Napoli, but again, hasn't really taken him any further. I think maybe Ancelotti has gone past that period. Allegri entices me. Simeone now entices me. I really just want someone with that prestige. Obviously, what Simeone's done at Atleti, he made them La Liga winners. He's took them to Champions League finals. Nuno at Wolves, says Apuram. Again, doing decent stuff at Wolves, but they've had a really, really tricky start to the season, and I'm just not sure. Carl says Eddie Howe, possibly. I feel like this talk about Aubameyang's contract and Emery's 3-year contract of what he signed at the start has taken a huge tangent now. Wow, we've had the Marco Bielsa shout from Nico. That's very brave. And Omar says that Mourinho would be his first choice. Wow. Some really incredible suggestions from you guys. Zidane, says Nick. Neil Warnock. Isn't that the perfect place to sort of round off today's show? A show in which we wanted to talk about Aubameyang and Emery's contract, and it finishes off with Neil Warnock. I think that's great. I really do. Thank you ever so much, everyone, for tuning in today. Really sorry about the rain. Really sorry about this awful formal attire. It's really not me for the show whatsoever. And apologies for my rant about spending too much money on a house and then £165 on new tyres that I thought I wouldn't have to buy, but now I do. So sorry for that rant and that rant then. So yeah, you know, you can really tell when something gets under my skin. Thank you ever so much, everyone that's tuned in today. I really, really appreciate it. Sorry for the sort of 4-day gap you've had since shows. International break, you know, it's just one of those. Sometimes you want to take a step back and just relax on the channel for a bit. So I've done that, but now we're back and we're kicking. Eyes of the Opposition shows will be out. I'm in talks with someone from the Blades podcast to do a preview for Sheffield United. Quick Take, hopefully, will also be back with the boys. Preview shows of the week, maybe a couple of tactical breakdowns looking at how Pepe might be doing in the second part of this first half of the season. Of course, score for the Ivory Coast, really, really positive, good to see, but how might he fit in moving forward? If you've enjoyed the show, please give it a like, please drop one on the channel. If you're enjoying things, subscribe if you're new around here with those notifications turned on, so you can see all these guys in the chat that have been tuning in this afternoon. You could be that person as well, getting your thoughts, getting your questions in, getting your points across. Thank you ever so much. I will see you again very, very soon, and as always, up the Arsenal.